Now, will Stormy Daniels sweep away Donald Trump, or as our poll puts it, will Stormy Daniels sink Donald Trump? Overwhelmingly, our respondents, between 83% and 90% of you, think that she will not, and 20,000 people have voted. You can get your vote in the next 10, 15 minutes. The one and only Garland Nixon is a powerful antidote to our last guest. Here he comes. Garland, very, very, very glad to see you. Even more than usual, I'm glad to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about Stormy Daniels. It's not a weather warning. She's a real person, albeit not every part of her is real. But will she sink Donald Trump?
I suspect not. In reality, when you look at the current what is expected to be charges against Donald Trump, we're looking at something that if they were valid, which I'm not so sure that they are, they wouldn't be anything that I would think would cause someone to go to jail, maybe finable at the most in reality. But this is just part of a larger set of actions against Donald Trump. There are investigations into him for January 6th. There are investigations into Donald Trump for Georgia, something going to do with Georgia in the election. A lot of the investigations, we're not even sure what they were. And keeping in mind that this has been the state of affairs since before Donald Trump got elected, a constant array of investigations and allegations thrown against Donald Trump. I'm a lefty, as you know, like you, and certainly not a Donald Trump supporter. But to live in a country where the leading candidate in the opposition party is being arrested and investigated for multiple alleged infractions certainly gives me the feeling that my country has slipped far away from what we would consider a republic or a democracy.
Yes, I mean, one can have fun all night with it about the presidents and high officials, panjandrums in the State Department and so on, who have done far, far worse than pay hush money to a slattern, as Lionel put it, and have never been investigated or prosecuted. But we are where we are. On Tuesday, it would appear the last president of the United States is going to do a perp walk. He's going to be photographed in a mugshot, like, natural born killers. He's going to be fingerprinted. He might even be handcuffed. Can it seriously be held, as so many of our voters on the poll seem to think, that will boost his potential to win in 2024? I find that hard to believe.
I tend to think that it will, because so many people are unhappy with the system, and I foresee over the course of time the Ukraine conflict becoming less and less popular. If you look at all of these illegitimate wars and invasions that the U.S. has done, particularly over the last 20 years, it's easy to predict that over the first 2, 3, 4 years they get continuously less popular. So Donald Trump has taken a position against the against the U.S.'s participation in the Ukraine conflict, and he wants it over. And I suspect that as the sentiment grows amongst the American populace, which it is currently growing, turning a corner, as the arguments arise over more money going to the Ukraine conflict, that the support for Donald Trump will increase, and that people will connect the multiple investigations against Donald Trump and the charges against Donald Trump, and the more charges that will likely be rising, that they will connect these things to his opposition to some of the foreign policy actions taken by the neocons who are currently in power. So I'm suspecting that when it comes down to it, in the same way that prior to 2016, I was one of the people that thought Trump would win. And I thought the people, when they hear the CNN and the MSNBC people and the Washington Post people attacking Donald Trump day in and day out, they think, well, we really hate you a lot worse than we hate him. And I think that, yes, I think that his popularity will rise. They will effectively, politically martyr him. And if the system goes after you like this and people get more unpopular with the system, heaven knows if there's some kind of a bank crash, which seems on the horizon, that Donald Trump will look like a person who, the system is trying to hang him out to dry because he's telling the truth. I'm not saying that is, in fact, a reality, but I'm saying I think that sentiment will increase.
It's bizarre that he has been indicted before Hunter Biden.
Well, when you look at this, one of the things that we started to hear at the beginning was no one is above the law. But that quieted down quickly because right now the Biden administration is pushing, they're fighting for all they're worth to prevent an investigation into the Nord Stream bombing. Everyone knows that Joe Biden is the Nord Stream bomber, as it were, and they're fighting to stop that, which is a violation of international law and, of course, a violation of federal law and constitutional law here in the United States. We look at Hunter Biden. Well, you could go on forever there. The FBI has admitted that they had Hunter Biden's laptop for an entire year before the 2020 election and the controversy arose, and they didn't see fit to investigate any of the multiple issues in there that certainly appear to be of a criminal nature, and the most obvious one being a violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, the FARA Act. Clearly, there are multiple violations of that by Hunter Biden. So the idea that no one is above the law is not sticking to. I mean, you could go on and on. Hillary with the multiple 33,000 emails erased. Where does it stop? So it becomes very, very obvious that Donald Trump is a special case. That this is in fact selective prosecution, which again, selective prosecution is unconstitutional on its face.
What about his Republican rivals? DeSantis faced a tricky situation because, of course, Donald Trump is his constituent. He's the governor of Florida. Trump lives in Florida. If Trump did not surrender to the New York authorities, DeSantis would have had to grant extradition from one state to the other. Said that he wouldn't, but only once he knew that he wouldn't have to because Trump was going to go anyway. It's tricky for his Republican rivals how to handle this, isn't it?
And it's particularly tricky for a number of them because they are inured to the same corrupt system that's going after Donald Trump. So they want to keep, 1 foot inside the circle and 1 foot out. They want to certainly, maintain support from the, maybe 35, 40% of the Republican Party that's diehard Trump, that's not going anywhere under any circumstances. They know they can't win without that. But at the same time, I suspect that a number of them are aligned with the system. And if they can find a way to get Donald Trump out of the way so that they can seek their own political fortunes, they'd be happy to do it. So it's a tightrope walk for particularly someone like DeSantis. And to be quite frank, not that I support either of these parties. But I see DeSantis very much like a Joe Biden, a person who will, talk a populist game, et cetera, when he's out of office. And as soon as he gets into office, he is part of the machine in the worst kind of way.
Now, I don't know what the opinion polling is or even if there's been any, but I do know that Donald Trump raised $5 million in the 48 hours after this indictment was publicized, and it's presumably grown a fair bit since then. As you say, 40% of Republican voters are not just going to vote for Donald Trump, but they're going to fund him. So he can afford the best of lawyers, although I'm not sure he's currently hired the best of lawyers. You're a man that knows about courtrooms. You are a former law enforcement official, a former executive member of the American Civil Liberties Union. Talk us through what would happen, what happens on Tuesday, and what happens when charges are laid and a trial begins.
Well, what I expect to happen, of course, there will be the administrative procedures on Tuesday, where he will be advised of the charges against him, and he will, of course, in all likelihood, the fingerprinting, they call it processing, where he is fingerprinted, where he has to present identification, and where he takes a picture, which is commonly known as a mugshot. Basically, he will be identified as who he is, and then he will be presented with the charges against him. I would expect immediately his representation to pour over the charges and begin filing motions for dismissal. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them are successful. I don't know, but that's what in the immediacy they'll be filing motions for dismissal, picking the charges apart. And keep in mind, again, these are charges that the Federal Election Commission, that the federal government looked at and elected not to move forward with it. So the federal government decided, well, there's no there, and so some local attorneys in New York decided, we're going to take these same charges, these same allegations, and turn them into charges. I mean, and if we're honest about it, I mean, even the business about if he had an affair with Stormy Daniels and paid her off in Washington, D.C., in New York City, this is not the most rare instance that would ever occur. But the idea that at that point, I think one of the issues is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to have to prove that he did that for purely political purposes. Now, if you look at this, he's a married man. It is a valid argument for him to say, I did it because I didn't want to get in trouble with my wife. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So to prove that he did it solely to affect the outcome of the elections, I think is impossible. But I think the idea is there are more charges coming from various, they're going to, do they call it shotgunning, throw all the charges they can up against the wall against Donald Trump. And try to find a way to prevent him from running, because most likely he'll win. But again, a lot of people in other countries may not realize that Eugene Debs ran for president, I believe in the 1920s, somewhere around that, from prison. So the Constitution only says, you have to be 35, et cetera. It sets out the standards, but one of the standards has nothing to do with being convicted of a crime or being in prison. So none of those things, I don't believe constitutionally that Congress will be able to find a way to stop Donald Trump from running, regardless of how many charges that they allay against him over the course of this time. I think it's busy work. I think it's public relations, et cetera.
You'll like this comment on YouTube. Timothy Gibbons. Garland's IQ is too high. There should be a brain warning when he is coming on. And so say all of us. Garland Nixon, thank you very much indeed.